This is from NeMa conference, and I'm with Tim Howell, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Euroclear. Tim, you spoke today about the future. As far as Euroclear is concerned, can you tell me what you think your biggest strategic threat is, and also what your biggest strategic opportunity is?
Yeah, thanks, John. These are, to some extent, two sides of the same coin. So, being the optimist, to start with the opportunities. I think we're reaching a stage where, with a continued focus on efficiency, with the financial industry having low returns on equity compared to history, that we are seeing an increased demand for people to set up utilities that can do functions which people consider not to be critical in terms of their unique selling points. And these are changing, and they're increasing, and there is more focus as to what constitutes something which is important to an individual company and what is something they're willing to put into a utility. This is very difficult. People have different views. People have different willingness and ability to work in groups, but I think that we are seeing an alignment of the stars such that if there is ever going to be progress down this route, now is that time. And for example, one thing may be, as an example, the joint venture we're doing on collateral with the DTCC. So you're trying to do something between two main areas of the world, between Europe and the States. And I think there's more opportunity for those. As I say, the flip side in terms of threat, in terms of strategic threat, and I'll come on to sort of a tactical threat in terms of the cyber type stuff, the strategic threat is that some of the drivers that is hitting banks' ROEs, whether it be capital, liquidity, regulation, or whatever, there's a lot of change happening, particularly on the European side of the water these days. And there are just unintended consequences flying around. And so we just have to be careful as to whether there are issues there, because the problem with unintended consequences from regulation is that they take 5 to 6 years to be resolved. And that's quite a long time.
Tell me, focusing very much on the opportunity, when you talk about people outsourcing more to the utilities, can you give us some tangible examples of where they are doing that outsourcing, or where perhaps they're considering doing such outsourcing?
Well, if we're brutally honest, regrettably, we've been in this industry long enough to know this has been tried at least 105 times and failed nearly all of them. So the classic areas are something to do with network, are something to do with corporate actions. And to the extent that people think that they have a unique advantage or they are much better than other people, then that has been not happened in the past. What I'm now seeing, which makes the difference, is that the people pushing for this are the chief execs of the whole banks. Mm-hmm. They're saying, we have done a lot of internal cost savings, we have outsourced to somewhere cheap, we've done all these things, but the reality is it is still not cheap enough. And so individual organizations reach a limit as to how much they can save on their own. Therefore, the next stage on savings is in terms of having someone do it for a variety of organizations. At the moment, there are discussions, frankly, for almost everything in post-trade. Most of them will be somewhat optimistic, grand projects about changing the world. Some will start that way and come back to something which is more tangible. Because I do think, for this to move forward, you can't just say, this is an idea and we'll come back in 5 years. There's got to be something which comes along in the meantime. So I suspect the things that do come along will be the things we've always talked about in the past, which are, to do with, and the corporate actions is the classic, which has been talked about for a very long period of time.
So if I can just take a point, when you are looking at people outsourcing, are you looking at them to outsource their process or their process and risk? So we're talking about corporate action, so there's two sides of that coin.
Oh, there are. They want to outsource process and risk, and everyone else wants to insource just process. So the risk side is, frankly, I think the risk side will be largely determined by regulators. So the general rules are that if people outsource functions, they outsource sort of processes, they still have to have some skin in the game in terms of risk. But I think the idea of some sort of mutualization concept on costs, which may have something on risk but not totally, it is difficult, but I think this is where it's going to happen, because every organization is spending hundreds of millions.
Okay, one final question, Tim. Often when I've looked at utilities, they have talked about new products and new areas. And then when I look back at them 5 years later, I find that 90% of their business is in the traditional space. Do you think that we are now at a point where that is going to change?
Oh, I think there's two things. So if I go back sort of 4 years at Euroclear, we're going to come into a definition of traditional, but probably 90% of the business we did was the traditional European settlement. Probably that number is now mid-60s because you're doing a lot more work outside Europe. Now, there may be some traditional businesses, but you're taking those to Latin America, you're taking them over to China, you're taking them to other parts of the world. In terms of products, I think you are, particularly on the collateral side, I think there are significant developments there. And the final one where I think there is a big change is actually taking, you can argue it's a big change, it's taking a lot of the techniques of the securities industry and say applying them to the funds industry, which is still one that has fairly low straight-through processing rates. So you can have a debate about whether that's a new product or not. It's certainly a new customer set of something which is already existing. And we do find with certain products we have a range of things called global reach. What does that really mean? That's kind of a marketing line. But what it really means is you are taking products and services which perhaps in Europe and the States we consider to be boring and normal and commoditized, and taking them to other parts of the world where these are still quite avant-garde, where security is still and local legal issues are still very significant. So I think there was a lot going on there. But one way or the other, this is a business which is somewhat traditional in nature, and I think we need to be careful to make sure we don't get too stuck in the traditional approach to life.
Tim Howell, CEO of Euroclear, thank you very much indeed.